You did it. What are we? Hello, Colombians. We are. That was a really long break. It really was. That was unintentionally a few weeks off. We had hopes and dreams of this cool stream, and then the scheduling just didn't work out, and I hadn't devised backup plans. So it's fine. We just took a little bit of a hiatus is all. So
A little break. That's all.
a little break, a little tiny break. We'll also be taking a break. 2 weeks from now is my actual birthday, and so I'm not at work that day. I'm actually sword fighting that day. I will be at a tournament in Las Vegas competing in longsword, but that's a different stream, not this one. Couple quick announcements before we get in. Today's episode is really just kind of a discussion. So first of all, because we didn't get to stream at a corresponding time, we are very belatedly acknowledging that Kubernetes turned 10. Yay.
Yes. Happy belated birthday, Kubernetes. We suck, and we're sorry.
So bad. Kubernetes turned 10. I actually went to the Kubernetes turns 10 party that they had at the Google headquarters over here in the Bay Area, Mountain View. That was really cool. A lot of the people who really were on the ground floor on day 0 and day 1 of Kubernetes were there. I got to meet Kelsey Hightower in person finally, which was really exciting for me.
That's cool.
He's really a very neat person to talk to. He emceed the event just like he did the very first I don't know if they even called it KubeCon back there. I don't remember, but the very first KubeCon. And so that was really cool. I got to learn a lot about what happened behind the scenes, talk to a lot of people, see the people in the community. Obviously, quite a few people from the various SIGs and steering and so forth were there. And then it was hosted by the CNCF. So a bunch of the CNCF people were there. So that was really cool. And then right after that, I turned around and went to Seattle for Cloud Native Security Con, which was also really great. That was a very excellent convention, although small. So that's where we have been. And Jonny went and did things too, I think.
I took 1 day off for my birthday, which was June 20th, and then I think it was just some scheduling conflict things, right? I can't remember exactly what's going on. The whole basically since February has been a blur for me. So
it's been quite the year. It really has been quite the year. Anyway, so Kubernetes turns 10. That was cool. Jonny, I had announcements and I forgot them.
So was it cool? So Kelsey is a celebrity in our world, right?
Yeah.
So did you go full fangirl and or were you just stoic?
I totally took a selfie with him. Okay. And then somebody offered to take the picture, and I was like, no, I really want the crappy selfie experience.
Yeah, I need my thumb in it and everything.
Exactly. It really needs to be the whole vibe. Anyway, so that's great. But I've actually had a conversation with Kelsey before over Gmeet one time. Is I was just I had posted on Twitter, and I was like, everybody keeps asking me if I know Kelsey Hightower, and someday somebody's going to ask him if he knows me. And he's like, we should meet so that I can say yes. And we totally had a Google Gmeet conversation. Same
nice.
Day. He's a really cool guy. He's, was very generous with his time, offered me some great advice and mentorship, which I kind of, got a little bit of another taste of when I met him in person briefly. Just an absolutely fantastic human being.
That's awesome.
So, other announcements, kind of relevant. It's how did we come up with, we're going to talk about technical debt on GitOps Guy today. And that's because I am working with a couple colleagues of mine in the open source community, and we are writing a book on platform engineering. And my final chapter that I had to submit the first draft of, was on technical debt in platform engineering. So went through that whole process. It's been very top of mind for me. I've got my chapters back from the editor. I have to do my revisions. So of course, it's the thing I'm thinking about. And I told Jonny, I was like, I can't think of anything else useful. This is what we're talking about. But yeah, the book is exciting. We should be, we're talking about the exact publication dates next week. But I think it's going to be actually out at KubeCon North America. And I think that my colleagues, Andy Gabner and Max, who's very German last name, I do not try to say, will have I think they will have some copies with them at the event. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to go. So If you are going to KubeCon North America, you might be able to even pick up my book. I will not be there. My child's birthday is that week. I will be at home with my child for his birthday. Also, Salt Lake City is cold, and I'm from California, so no thank you. Let's be real. I don't do cold very well.
Utah in November. Is it that? Oh, yeah. Okay. It's starting to get cold then. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cold. Yeah. No thank you. Anyway, so, right. Yes, these are new swords. I just saw the chat. They're new-ish, so it depends on new. This one I bought at the tournament in Las Vegas last year, which is where I'm going again today or this year, and I'm not buying another sharp sword. I promise. This will step in February at the tournament in SoCal, and they're fun. They're sharp. They are real swords. These are not the ones that I actually fence opponents with. These are the ones that we take to a big empty warehouse and chop up the Tommy mats and pool noodles with. I also have another sword down here. You can't see it. It's its case. Yes, did I take my swords out and cut down weeds after the rainy season in my backyard? Maybe. I might have. My time.
Yes. Use your tools, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than a machete or a scythe. It's just got a crossguard.
Did you paint half your face blue?
No.
Like Braveheart?
Not the right type of sword.
Okay. I don't know.
Look, might I buy another sword? Maybe. It depends on what they have. It is my birthday, okay? If I buy another sword for my birthday, it's because I'm very thoughtful and I love to get myself nice presents. I'm just
So do you have a truck rack, like a sword rack in your vehicle, like a gun rack in a truck, and then you have your swords kind of in the back?
I don't, but I probably should do something because honestly, even just transporting the practice swords, which are the non-sharp ones. I like that this became a stream about historical European martial arts, by the way. That's the type of sword fighting I do. It's an internationally ranked sport. It's very fun. You should check it out. It's great workout. Good way to make adult friends. You just hit each other with sticks. The swords are they only weigh about 2.5 pounds. Actually, that's a really heavy sword even. So like the swords I use actually weigh less because I am a small human. They are very flexible too. There's actually a rule about how flexible the sword is. So that means the amount of pressure required to bend it. So they're not as flexible as like the Olympic foils, which you might be familiar with, but they are pretty flexible. And so they can get like knocked around in the back seat, even in there, unless I'm in like a hard shell case, but in their like little, I have them in like sock. There's actually like sword socks anyway. Mm-hmm. So I have them in that. And, so they can get kind of knocked around a little bit tweaked. So it's not a bad idea actually to put them up because I bring my sword and then my husband brings his sword and then like the long swords. And then we have the sabers. And then we have the small swords, and then we will eventually have the rapiers. What do you mean? What's the interest in swords? This is what I do with my time. I'm going to a sword fighting competition. Anyway, it's a very expensive hobby, but I recommend it. Anyway, so the point is there's a lot of swords in the back, and they kind of end up in this awful pile. And I should actually legitimately put up a rack. It would take my swords. And then we bring the spares that we take with us in case anybody needs to borrow a sword, because the club has a full armory full of swords and gears and everything like that. But, sometimes like the person with the armory can't be there for whatever reason. So then we end up just people lend out their stuff to the rest of the club. Anyway, HEMA's cool. You should all try it. That was a really, I hope you're happy, R-Hope9. You got me talking about swords, and I will never shut up about it if you let me keep going on. And we actually have a real topic today.
That's awesome.
I actually have a competition, not this weekend, but next weekend. So next week I will be in Raleigh, North Carolina for a face-to-face. Really excited. I get to see my peers, meet people. And then I'm going to be competing in Charlotte right after. So that'll be fun. I guess technical debt is not as cool as swords, but kind of a cool thing to talk about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess.
I don't know. If you guys let me, I would sit here and literally it would just become Hillary's HEMA live stream while I try and convince everybody in my life to do the sport with me. But since we're not doing that, let's actually get into technical debt, right? So actually, one thing I thought was really interesting about technical debt, I was having this discussion earlier, and there is a bit of a consistent definition of technical debt, but I have a somewhat. It's kind of an. I end this stream by saying choose your technical debt wisely, right? And for folks who've been with me since I started saying that, I think you know why I say that. But for folks who are newer or folks who haven't seen it, basically the premise that I kind of based my life off of is that whenever you are, trying to solve a problem, choosing a solution, building a product, you are gaining technical debt with every decision. Like you're going to solve some problems, but you're going to get a trade-off. And it's sort of like a financial ledger, right? You got, you're going to basically spend a little bit of money on your credit card to earn this much money from the product, but like that's still there. You don't really ever pay it off. Some of it you literally just cannot pay off. It's just like kind of the cost of doing business, and it can accrue interest. And this was really, it obviously, like I said, it's top of mind for me because I'm writing a book and I had to write the whole chapter about it. But also the team I lead, the product I lead, we have, we've been around for several years. That means we've got technical debt because, the Azure cloud has evolved. And so it's time for us to make some changes. Golang has evolved. So, if we want to leverage some of the nicest factors of the language, we need to make some changes in our code base, things that it didn't support, it now supports, and we might need to restructure. Certain best practices have changed. Certain libraries no longer need to be revendored to turn FIPS on because it's on by default. Like some of those just things that we did because we needed to. It's like old swords versus new swords. Yes! I like that you brought that back for me. Yes, it's time to de-rust and shine and oil the sword and then hone it, right? Sharpen and hone. I don't know if you've ever sharpened a knife. You have to first sharpen, right? And then actually the honing is important anyway. That's what we need to do with our code base, right? And so one of the things that we started kind of talking about is what are mitigation strategies around technical debt. And obviously GitOps is really helpful there, right? GitOps, star as code, infra as code, or whatever, right? By having a declarative environment, right, you can get a better accounting of things, and you can leverage tools like SBOMs to track, CVEs and security vulnerabilities. Definitely put that in the technical debt ledger side of pieces. And those things that are pop up and you can solve, and then those things that, maybe you just have to live with and carry. And so that was why, Jonny and I kind of had a little sidebar conversation. I was like, let's talk about that and just kind of a little bit more of a, there's really nothing technical demo here. We would love to hear about technical debt and solutions that you think of or have for it or mitigations you choose in your organization. And just kind of, we do this every now and again, just a little bit more of a just discussion-y thing. So that's today. We're just kind of discussing, I think, especially in the validated patterns, Jonny, you probably see some really interesting things as it relates to technical debt, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of ours is the big one that comes to mind when I think about this is documentation all the time. It's always one of those things where it's okay, I'll do this later. I'm just going to implement this thing and I'll get back to it.
Last words.
Yeah, 100%. And it hits you in the face sometimes when it comes back full circle, right? Because what happens is somebody's like, oh, I was going to do this, but then I was looking at it and I don't know what this thing actually does. And so when I went and looked at the documentation, there was nothing there. And you're like, dang. Yeah, that's me. That's me.
Yeah, the archaeology, right, that you need to do on some of this stuff that's not well documented. And even sometimes the what could be very well documented, but the why. If the why is not documented, oh my goodness, that takes forever to suss out. Is it safe to change? Right?
Yeah.
Because that's really the big one for me is, I can see what you did. I can read code. So I can tell what you did. Why did you do that? And is it safe to change? And the why could be a lot of reasons. It could be, because of the integration piece required it to be this way. And maybe that's still true, and maybe that's not true anymore. And therefore it's safe to change, or it's not safe to change. That could be just because I ran out of time and I had to do something quick and dirty, which also means therefore it's safe to change. Or it also could be, there's this hard limitation, or there's a race condition if you don't do it this way. So even though it's weird, this is the better way to do it. There's like a bunch of different reasons why you might do something, which, makes perfect sense. I mean, the why could even be because we didn't know better, or the language wasn't there, that it wasn't there at the time. A really great example of this is looking at the code base that I'm working on, and I was like, ooh, this looks like an opportunity for generics. And then having a discussion of like, yep, absolutely an opportunity for generics, but Golang didn't have generics when we started this. And so we'd actually have to do a whole lot of refactoring in order to be able to implement generics. And I was like, okay, cool. We'll mark that down on the technical debt we accept and just have two really similar functions, because that's just where we are. Because going back and doing that level of refactoring, let's be really honest, we're never going to do it. We know we should. It's there. We really ought to. Realistically, we're not going to do that unless some other thing happens that causes us to makes it an absolute must. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of the technical debt, is you can lie to yourself and say, I'll do this later, whether that's documentation, whether that's fixing something that's hard-coded to make it dynamic. That I'll do this later, I'll get to this, I'll rewrite it, is a lie you've told yourself. Just comment the code, acknowledge the problem, and move on. I love a code comment that's just like, to do, make this better, or, to do, make this dynamic, or to do, fix the hard coding, because it tells me somebody knows that they could have been better and has just acknowledged it. And then also, if it's a to do, it tells me it is safe to change, because that's the biggest question I have when, onboarding to a new code base and seeing some of these issues is it safe to change? Because if we get to the point where we really need to do something here, you really need to split off, a monolith into submodules or whatever, right? Then I need to know what's safe to do and what's safe not to do. And when you don't have a basis of that knowledge, you just have to make assumptions, and then you have to test your assumptions, and you're going to spend a lot of time, like I said, on the archaeology, trying to understand, more what the consequences are going to be. And having that why documented either in a code comment or somewhere up front, architecture decision record, however it is you do this, put it in the JIRA. I really don't care where you write down why the thing happened, but please, for the love of your colleagues and those who will come after you, please write down why.
We started adding comments, so if we're writing like a Helm chart, we started adding like comments in line, or like a pre-line or something like that, where it's like, hey, we're setting this because of this. For more information, go here, right? Yes. So like one of the things we do, like an imperative kind of framework, right, where it's like, hey, there's sometimes I have to take an action, I have to initiate something, right, or do something that doesn't really fit declaratively. And so it's like, the defaults, we made some sane defaults, but it's like, hey, if you need to go override this, like here's where you go look, and here's how you do it, right? I mean, this isn't necessarily a tech debt thing, but it was initially because it was a documentation thing. How do I use it? How do I override it? If I need to change this thing, how do I do it? And that was one of those things that came out where the customer was like, I see it's there. I want to use this image though, and I want to use these parameters. Like, how? And so like we had to go back and like, okay, 100% correct. Like we just took off on this.
Yeah. Anything that prevents adoption, definitely technical debt, right? Definitely technical debt. If it's preventing adoption, that's tech debt. You got to fix it. And some of the things, like I said, like some things you can't really ever fix. You're going to have to do something in a weird suboptimal way because of something else that you don't control. And that's all right, as long as it's like, as long as the why is documented. What do we have? We had one recently, and this is just a very, I don't know, this is like a very like basic case though. And so it was, leveraging tokens. And so there's a check that just kind of checks like, hey, is this token going to expire within the next 5 minutes? And if it is, renew it first. If it's not, go ahead, right? And so my question was, okay, why 5 minutes? Like, how frequently do these tokens actually expire? Is 5 minutes is like this something that takes multiple minutes and therefore it could expire while this is running? The answer to that was yes. And so, so why 5 minutes? It was just that was my first question. I'm like, logically this is very sound, but why 5 minutes?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, how long do these live? How long does this really take? Should it be 10 minutes? What could cause us to run slower than we expect? What could make it run faster? And the reality is it runs at about a minute. And if it's taking longer than a minute, something's gone terribly wrong anyway, so fine, whatever. But these were the questions I had to, this was the conversation I had with the developer who was working on it to understand why. And I was like, hey, we need to write that down somewhere, because that is context that now lives in your head as the person who did this, but we don't know, the next time this has to be looked at, the next time this has to be changed. There's also some concurrency in there. So if we have to make alterations to the concurrency logic, like some of this stuff just needs to be, you can't really assume the next person to work on it is going to have any sort of an easy time finding out what you found out in order to do the thing you needed to do, because documentation gets deprecated, it gets moved, it gets changed, it gets updated, and therefore things are different than from the time you actually originally wrote the feature, whatever it is, right? And so that one for me was just like kind of explaining to people, like, I don't really care. Unfortunately, there's not an easy way to establish a single source of truth on a development team, right? Especially like something like that, which is really doesn't matter to the end users. Like the end users do not care about whether or not our internal infrastructure is seeing if a token refresh needs to happen now or in 10 minutes. Like they don't care. They care that we're changing our tokens like we're supposed to, because that's security best practice. But it's not for them. And so like we can document it in the code and put the comments and the whys, and that's completely reasonable. We could put it in our internal documentation. We could put it on the Jira. There's, it starts getting through establishing that single source of truth for the whys, also becomes really fun. And I always tell people, I was like, my personal way of working, and I think I'm curious as to yours, Johnny, actually, my personal way of working is to actually go back to something like Jira to start off with, to see what conversations happened in the comments, what breadcrumbs exist, what were the link outs, and other issues linked to through the whole thing, and see if I can kind of recreate the product, like the plan in Jira, and to see if that helps solve that archaeology problem versus just kind of blindly like searching documentation and everything else like that. I'll try the ticketing system first.
Yeah, I think nowadays it's probably more like I'll use Git history and I'll go look in like the commit logs and stuff like that. And then if it's like an open source repo, then I'll go look out in like their issues, right, and start tracking. So essentially the same thing, right? Going through and looking at the tickets and stuff. But yeah, we do a lot of like looking through the Git log and seeing what's going on, and okay, when did this change, and then trying to basically work backwards from there. And to your point, right, like that one little change that you're talking about, it's trivial. Like when you think about it, you're like, oh, it's who cares, right? But it's the death by 1,000 paper cuts if you don't have that understanding, because that change might have a downstream effect on the next thing, which might have a downstream effect on the next thing. And like we went through that, like something similar way back in the day, 100 years ago when I was in consulting, and like the way that we had to move content from like a connected side to a disconnected side was a very, very rigid process. And it was like, if you change one little parameter, which might seem like, oh, okay, it's super simple, who cares? You won't see it until you're like 3 steps ahead or 3 steps down or 3-4 steps down, and then you're like, oh my god, this is the worst. And so like we basically, like in our playbooks, like we would have this, and then to Darth Bikes here, like we'd have like a little debug message like, we're doing this because of this. So when you run the playbook, you would see like this little blurb. It's like, here's why, because it sucked if you mess it up.
Yeah, I have one of the things I like to do when I mean, not that I've had to do one of these in a while, but like a make file, right? You've got a make file, and you've got this great single like make production, right? And it just goes and it does all the things. I always had mine throw out regular like echoes. And sometimes it was a pop culture reference. Like I'm really good at those. So like what it was like about to kick off, it would say like, I'm a leaf on the wind, which is a Firefly reference. Right. So, sometimes it'd be stuff like that, but a lot of times it's kind of like, if you've gotten here, this has completed, because there's nothing worse than like a make file that sets up a bunch of stuff, like does infrastructure, all this other things. And then you have to figure out if it fails where it died. And so just having those regular outputs, I think I got this from basically my, my days of debugging PHP, which, I actually took off my resume because no, thank you. But, that was really like a common thing that we would do then, is like, all right, we're just going to throw some echoes around the place to see where this really died, because there's no stack tracing or whatever. But yeah, I got in the habit of doing that myself. Was that way, if something ended up partly set up or partly existence, or like if I'm doing this in the cloud, that could be costing me money if I don't go back and clean up everything, and to know what to clean up, it's easier to know at the point at which the failure occurred.
Yeah.
And now, we've got pipelines and so much other stuff that can actually just go back and automatically clean that stuff up for you, which is great. That gets into the GitOps helps solve your technical debt kind of side of the discussion that we can go into. But yeah, that was messages
Oh, yeah.
that tell you what's going on. Explain it to me like I'm 5, please. I always tell people, can you just, I'm dumb, so talk to me like I'm dumb.
Yeah. Break it down for me.
Break it down, because what I'm obviously not literally dumb, but the reality is that is you never really know what assumptions you're making until you've accidentally face plant into that assumption that you've made that was wrong. And then you're like, oh man, I could have sworn this for this whatever reason it was that I could have sworn it. It could be something that really was real but changed, and you missed the fact that it changed. It could be a misunderstanding, whatever it is. So it's really good to like really explicit messaging, really explicit like code comments, documentation, echoes, whatever it is that you're doing. And, yes, we do have GitOps and pipelines and things that can, clean up failed problems, but that stuff could also fail too. So you still need to know what's going on.
Yeah, we do a lot of like commenting in our make files. Like we actually have a like a help menu in our make file, so that way you can like, oh, how do I do this? Like, how do I render all of my manifests if I want to do this? Just to make sure that like it's going to render correctly, or at least on the surface it should work based off of this, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that stuff is like it becomes second nature once you get used to doing it. Like I think once you get used to like, okay, let me just add a little, even if it's something stupid, like I hate this so much, but I'm having to do it right now because of just throwing little jabs at whatever tech you're working on. But one thing that we started doing too, or I shouldn't say one thing, another thing that we started doing that my manager is like really big on is like, even if it's just a small problem, like you have this expectation that it should work like this, submit a Jira issue. So that way, because it's not fair to like your team if you're working on something, you're expecting it to do something and it doesn't work like that, and you just let it go, because there might be somebody else that that's coming in cold from this that might expect the same thing. Like on the surface it should just do this, and then it doesn't, and then there's no tracking, and then the whole thing kind of gets lost. So that's something that like personally I've been trying to get better about, is like, all right, let me go ahead and create a Jira issue. I'll link it to a GitHub thing, to the repo or whatever, and then at least it's being tracked somewhere. Somebody somehow somewhere can see it and see that here's the thing, here's my bypass, or here's what I did to fix it.
Yes, peer review definitely helps, but sometimes the team, there's only so many times you can edit your own like stuff, and that I think applies to the team as well. There's only so many times that you can look at things before you start accidentally assuming context, before you start having things in your head that make it clear to you but won't make it clear to a newer person. So it's always great to bring new people into the team just because of that. I do want to talk about how AI might change tech debt, because I actually talked about technical debt in my DEI community presentation this morning. So like rolling back, some people know this, some people don't. Red Hat sponsors a nonprofit called the WIT Network. And I created a community within that nonprofit called WIT-WISE, so Women in Tech, Women in Software Engineering. And so what we do is we do something monthly called a Coding Coaches Coffee Hour, which is even like more informal than this, where we just like talk about things. We do check-ins. We answer questions. I ask stupid questions. We had someone in one time who was like, she came to the thing because, obviously she wanted the community, and she happened to know a bunch about like robotics. So like we ended up asking her questions that day, right? That was really
Nice.
fun, especially for me. So it's really just like kind of very open forum, very casual. But I was talking about this one and developer burnout actually this morning. And so I got asked this question too, which is how might AI change tech debt or interact with tech debt? And this one is interesting because AI doesn't understand context, right? And so it is the way I see it right now is that AI is very helpful for efficiency. It's good for kind of that rubber duck, but it doesn't understand like systems. So it's not going to necessarily make good assumptions. Like if you are writing a piece of software and it accepts an interface or it has user input, it might be able to give you a decent output that has stuff there, but it's not going to really help you to understand, like it's not really going to help with like the negative test casing and the error cases. It may not think through things like, okay, what if somebody sends me what's that one, there's this one XML file that like blows up everything. It's like 10 million gigs in memory or something like that. It's a really common security injection test is to check for that. So it might do some best practices and so forth. And so but it's not, it's only as good as its models. And even like the things that might be in the model may not necessarily be using best practices, may not necessarily be using defensive programming. They may be older than certain known exploits, so they may not have like the newest and the latest and the greatest. May not be aware of all the libraries and how to properly use them. So it's kind of, and it's going to give you code that is, I mean, it's the code quality degree like really varies. Like I've seen a lot of like outputs, it really likes loops. It really does like a good for loop. And like who doesn't? But the sorry, my brain just, I got a Slack message and it just full core dump. I don't have multi-processing going today, obviously. Right, it lacks context. And so that human judgment that goes into our coding, and sometimes it may help you identify places where your code could be inefficiency or so forth. Yes, it has inherent tech debt by itself.
It 100% would, right? I mean, just to your point, right, that you just made a second ago, you still want to have somebody validate that what the output is factually correct before you distribute it out, right? Because if you don't, then you've already gained another amount of tech debt trying to go back and fix something that you didn't verify in the first place. So I mean, 100%.
And there's no why, right? If you have like AI generated code, like there's not really a good understanding of the why it did something, because it doesn't actually have a decision tree like a human does. So however, you could use AI to analyze code, and this is not new, by the way. Like this has been going on forever. You can use AI to analyze code and identify places where there could be optimizations or could be improvements. But what AI is not going to do is help you stack rank. Or like I said, if did I say this in this one or did I say it this morning? Right, you don't want a race condition, so you may not want to have something sped up to be 10 times more performant than it is, because you could be introducing race conditions by doing that. So you just kind of have to understand what AI can do, what it can look for, what it is useful for. It is a tool in your belt of helping you to work more efficiently, but it's not, you have to still use your actual like best judgment. Like you cannot blindly trust it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that, right? I think that I think if you use it for like syntax checking or like am I formatting this right? Is this am I formatting this in in proper YAML or what? I'm just being stupid, but like how does this look? And then like it can go in and it can check your spaces versus tabs. It can look at like your just generalized things right now, and they give you something back that says, hey, based off of this and off of these sources or whatever, here here's what I would recommend. But yeah, I
Style
definitely
guides,
think,
right? You want to make
yeah.
sure does this code is this code consistent to this style guide over here? Which maybe you've got a style guide in your code base, maybe you don't. Maybe you're just sort of loosely following one of the industry standard ones. However, it is right. You can do style guide comparisons. That's really useful because if the code is consistent and it follows the same style guide, that keeps the cognitive load lower for the developers when they have to go evaluate something to see how they would change it or refactor it or add additional, functionality to it, right? So that's really important.
And we're getting there, right? Like
we're getting there.
As the technology gets better and better and better, it's going to evolve, right? And it's going to be able to contextualize things appropriately. Like one of the things that I always mention that you mentioned is like, look at the logs and tell me what's wrong. Just tell me what is in the logs that's broken, and then I'll go there. And that's, I think once we get to that point where it can actually start doing that and say, oh look, hey, I see this error, and based on this error, here's the things that I would do, right? As it gets better and better and better with that, like I think that's where this part of it, like the contextualizing data that it's inputting, will be a lot better as well. So
yeah, I'm actually really excited about the open telemetry like adoptions and the kind of upswing in that for exactly this reason. Not just AI, because it doesn't even need to be AI that goes through and grabs those things. It can be anything. Just the fact that like actually like tagging the data a little bit more and therefore making it a little bit more usable. There was a system that I designed a couple companies ago. We had these IoT gateways. We had like 30 of them. And what we wanted to check for was like instances of logs and certain things that indicated certain like problems, race conditions, failure to connect on drivers or instantiate drivers, like issues with the radio waves, or like radio signals not connecting, or like they use like mesh networks, those mesh networks not correctly forming, and like the extent like the IoT devices and the gateway would know about that. And so what we did is we actually defined like a set of like known like errors, and like our gateway code like it put those out. And then what we would do is we would actually have a crawler that connected to all of our lab gateways. It would analyze the logs. It would pull out the log messages. It would grab a couple lines above, a couple lines below, and then it would just actually put together the instance count. So it'd say this happened over here, 10 times, 1 time, 6 times, like whatever it was. And so we knew, for example, that we had retries. And so on driver instantiation, sometimes there could be some race conditions because of the situations in like those libraries and so forth that we were using. So driver instantiation was one where seeing the log 1 time was okay. That was pretty normal and expected. Seeing the log 2 time is a little dicey, but anything more than that, it's a full failure. And so we actually had that thing because we had our lab environment was running 24/7. So we actually had like releases go out, and then we would just run that crawler. It was on a cron job. This was like, no, Kubernetes was not a thing. Or Kubernetes was a thing, but it wasn't a widely adopted thing. So we were not using it. So there's just a cron job that lived on a server in the same LAN. And it would run and it would grab all of that, and then it would create a report, and it committed the report to Git, which is, you might remember I said that all of my like testing at that company, all of the test reports also committed to Git. And then the pipeline cleaned up any test reports older than a certain either number or timestamp in order to kind of maintain the data to like sustainable, insane levels of usefulness. Within the checkout of the repository, right? Because that would be checked out with the whole repo. So obviously we don't need the repo checkouts taking 5 million years. And technically the Git history is always there. So if we really, really needed to go back and do the archaeology on past things, we would do that. Anyways, that's how we did it. I loved committing things to Git before the GitOps code term was coined. But yeah, that was one of the things that we did. And so like, I love open telemetry because it would make that exact process that we did so much easier.
Yeah.
And you can add in additional correlations and so forth. AI also can leverage that beautifully, but it doesn't even need to be AI. This is scripting. We did this with Node.js, right? I used to do cool things. I used to write cool code and stuff like that and design interesting systems. Now I do scary things like Azure Red Hat OpenShift that sometimes I'm like, oh no, how did I get here?
Oh, what is happening?
What is happening? How did I get here? It's a cool product, actually, what I work on, and I really like the work I do every single day. But it's very different leading a team in a product this scope compared to let's do some quick and dirty Node.js scripts and see what's going on.
Real enterprise versus team is like crazy different.
So different.
Yeah.
I love our Hopes 9 point here. Our Hope 9s. I can't language today. Really struggling with actually saying syllables in the correct order on words. This is a fun thing. I've mentioned this before. I have dyslexia, and if I'm tired, like it's all bad. I'm tired and it's all bad. I didn't sleep well because my Shiba Inu got in the bed with me and he's a bed hog, and now my brain is a disaster. Anyway, that's
mine is like I mumble. So I try not to mumble, but then if I'm tired or if I'm like over energized, right? Like I'm like a little kid at that point, like it's just mush coming out of the So I really try to slow down, but it's not good.
No, I do talk fast too. Does not help for sure. Slow it down, take a breath, stop being so excited. I like this topic a lot.
Focus, Hilary.
Focus.
It's like focus, Rickard, please.
Anyway, so test case implementation being the most frequent missing link in the CI/CD movement. Absolutely. You know this. Everybody knows this. If you don't know it for some reason or you're new here, before I was a reliability engineer at Red Hat, I was in quality engineering. I spent 11 years doing that compared to 4 years of reliability engineering. And the Venn diagram between those two things is almost a circle, by the way, which is why I was able to make the change. The test case implementation, it's just a very different way of approaching software engineering, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are really engineering software to, you're impersonating a human. You're engineering software to validate assumptions. You're engineering software to it's almost like a little bit of a challenge. Like, all right, how can I break this thing my friend built? And hopefully your relationship between your quality engineering team and your software development team is more like that. I'm going to break the thing my friend built. And not, I know that there can be tensions. I've lived all of those. Trust me. I have more than a decade of those problems under my belt. It should be a very collaborative engagement, I would hope. And so, I think a big problem with a lot of the modern CI/CD movements, if I can get on my little soapbox and preach a minute, is that we keep asking developers to do more. We're pushing testing left. We're pushing security left. We're pushing, I don't even know, everything left, right? And it's not that these things are not super critical. It's not that developers shouldn't be security conscious or shouldn't be doing test-driven development. It's that doesn't close the gap. It just kind of helps build the bridge out a little bit further. And so you still need the security experts. You still need the testing experts to come in and really, like, the reason I'm a good SRE is not because my skill set is building, enterprise grade software to deliver features to customers. My skill set is reverse engineering somebody else's enterprise grade software that gets delivered to customers and either figure out where it's broken or figure out where it might break. It's just a different skill set, right? And it's a different way of going into problems. I'm really good at reverse engineering systems and figuring out their faults. That's why I'm good at reliability. And so we can't keep asking people to do all of the things and expect them to do all of the things super well, because it's not possible. So somewhere one time I said this, and I'll say it again. The full stack engineer job title is a trap. That's a trap.
Yes.
Right. We're not in the LAMP stacks anymore. So the full stack engineer is not still expected to know Apache, MySQL, Linux, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, right? LAMP.
PHP, yeah.
You're not still, and then with PHP, then we added JavaScript, right? You're not still expected to know like the Linux and Apache web server stuff as often anymore. It still does happen to full stack developers though. But full stack developer is a trap. I'm sorry, I'm calling it out. It's just getting people to do more and not appreciating the value that a more like specialized skill set can bring. Or even if somebody is like a generalist and they're fully capable of doing all of those things, because lots of people are wildly talented and can, giving them the opportunity to focus as in a specialty to really apply all of their abilities in a targeted manner so that they do cool things. False positive testing. Oh my God, that's such a great yes, great point. Let me see if we have a shared understanding here of false positive testing, right? Because I said negative testing earlier, which is seeing how things fail. False positive testing is seeing if something gave you a green signal that should not have. And that is a very fun and interesting way of like trying to assess systems. For me, this shows up most as it worked until it didn't. So runtime, length of time on the test is a really great example of when you're going to see some false positives. Example. Wait, can I talk about this example? Hang on. Old job, NDAs. God, I hate NDAs. I like them never. I never like them. Trying to think. I can't talk about the exact issue, but I can talk about a related one. Okay, so related issue, something that as I was debugging this other issue, I found. It helped me to identify what was actually going on, so I can talk about this because this was a kernel bug that I found when I was doing my research. So the kernel bug that I found that helped me to ultimately find what was wrong talked about how on certain, this was a kernel bug, it was in Ubuntu, I want to say it was in Ubuntu 16-ish, something like that. Don't fully fact check me here because I'm not going to remember this very old at this point knowledge, but it went roughly like this.
Go with the story.
Yeah, it went roughly like this. We're embellishing a little bit for the sort of sake of the point. But basically what happened is that occasionally on boot or after reboot, the kernel would it would kind of hang. And so the reboot would fail, and so you needed to actually like do a hard reboot again. I don't remember the exact bug that was in the Linux kernel for this, but it basically was a race condition on boot that caused something to not be there when you were looking for it to be there. But so like 9 times out of 10, though, the boot system works great. Well, that one time it doesn't work so good, you've got a dead system that needs a physical button push. And so that for me is like kind of the false positive is just like it worked once, so you assume it always works. But you really need to actually see, does it work 100% of the time? Does it work 99% of the time? There's actually a reason why, this is a big reason why SREs typically consider like 100% is a terrible service level objective that we would never, ever put anywhere. If anybody ever does it, please send them to the stream so they can listen to me explain why you should never do that. And so, you really can't ever guarantee something's going to work 100% of the time. You could have a power outage. You could have a power interruption. You could have like the temperature on the CPU go way too high and things emergency shutdown. You could have a lot of things go wrong that are just race conditions or, noisy neighbor situations, so forth. Those types of things can be, just out of your control, or just, the computer's getting old, so the CPU hangs one time. Like, I don't know, lots of reasons why something could just fail, that no matter how good a job you do, you're just never going to control. So 100% SLO, you've got a dependency over here and your dependency is down, whatever it is, right? 100% SLO is an impossible target. You should never set it. You should set a target that you can reasonably expect. And it shouldn't be any better than the lowest SLO target of your of one of your dependencies. So if you've got a critical path dependency and its SLO is 99.5, your SLO is not going to be better than 99.5. That's just reality.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
You could have everything else 4 nines, but if that component has an SLO of less than 4 nines, you are placing a losing bet that they're going to maintain 4 nines without an SLO of 4 nines. And that's probably not going to be what happens. Yeah. And that's another piece of technical debt, really, honestly, is setting unattainable targets, SLOs, things like that from the service delivery, not service delivery, SRE. Service delivery is the name of the organization at Red Hat I'm in, except for that they just changed the name, but that's a different problem. Anyway, my brain is not braining. We already understand this. It's the organization should not set SLOs that are impossible. And impossible is 100%, and impossible is a higher SLO than a critical dependency. Now you could have some other side dependency that's only ever used in some corner cases and, make your own best decisions there. But realistically speaking, that's what you should do.
And that's important, right? I think to kind of just highlight why that's important. That's important because if you don't meet that SLO, that costs your company money, right? That costs Red Hat money or whomever it is, right? Somebody down the line they're gonna take on that charge because you promised something that you couldn't deliver.
Yep.
So that's
Well, and so also, if the error budget on an SLO is burning, right? What do people do? They stop what they're doing to go solve that problem, right? In SRE land, we call an incident, we gather a strike team, and we go take care of business, right? But if we set an impossible SLO, what did we just do? We just context shifted everybody who was doing other stuff. We just, kicked off this very, correctly so weighty process. And for that to have the issue of, this is not a real thing because we don't use one of these, but the database service that we rely on is having an outage, and they're within their, SLOs or SLAs is the agreement. It's usually what you actually promise to end customers. Yeah. And they can look the same or they can look different. That ends up being an organizational choice. I don't know. You do you. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not your business unit. I don't make these decisions for you. But if that ends up being the case, the database service that you're using is down and they're well within their promised downtime, you just got nothing. You can reduce your whole strike team to one person who just goes and refreshes their status page to see when it's back up. Or realistically, your alerting will probably resolve after that comes back. Yeah. Wait for the alerts to quiet and move on. Whatever it is that you do, however it is you want to address that type of a situation, the point is that you're going to have to answer to your end customers as well as to what the heck had just happened, because they're going to notice something like that. But two, you should be not promising something better than you can reasonably deliver. Now, obviously, when it's a much higher profile incident, a few years ago, there was an entire, I think it was East US on Amazon went down a couple of years ago, something like that.
Yes, US East 1.
US East 1, yeah, you remember. Yeah. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were within their SLAs, whatever. It's not my place to even comment, right? But that was such broad scale that everybody just kind of knew. That was basically a whole chunk of the internet is just out. And so when you have something at that huge of a scale, I think you still have to we still did the root cause analysis documents. We still went through the whole process on our end, even though it was kind of a shrug. We just waited for Amazon to come back. But that's a little bit easier for customers to swallow. It's a little bit easier for there's no technical debt thing to do there because the highest availability denominator is the thing that actually failed was the cloud, right? But when it is a smaller thing, a smaller component or whatever that you have a reliance on, that's going to kind of anchor. And so your SLOs, if you're an organization that is providing a service-based, service-based, I don't have another word than service there, but something as a service, software as a service, platform as a service, whatever star as a service it is. Those are going to be representative of your technical debt as well. That's a great way to measure technical debt too, because if you have an SLO and you are consistently not meeting it, something's causing you to not meet it. And so that's tech debt. If you have an SLO and you're really consistently exceeding it, you are at 4 nines and you're actually we're at 90% SLO, well, maybe it's time to raise that bar for yourselves. And then start looking at other ways to improve or other things to start addressing that are not directly feeding into that SLO. So you may have other places where you can start defining new SLOs. And then so that they can actually be really useful tools by measuring objectives, by measuring behavior and whether or not that behavior is delighting customers or delighting users or going well. That's a really great way to help identify what your technical debt is within your stack. And this is something where really the SREs end up doing a lot of the time. This is sort of our bread and butter of, all right, we have a system and it does things and QE has told us it works objectively. So now we're going to measure how frequently it works. How successful is it at working? It works, but, you know, the API response time is sometimes, you know, what's a good API response time? 200 milliseconds? 250 milliseconds every fifth call. We go investigate that, right? That starts getting into cool ways of identifying using observability data and SRE practices to measure your systems to see if they're performing within the benchmark expectations around CPU and memory, all those types of things. And so that's kind of like where reliability engineering and technical debt kind of marry and create the fun place that I actually really like to work on. Wow, we talked for almost an hour already. I really like this topic. I would hope it's clear I really like this topic because I always sign off the stream by telling people to choose their technical debt wisely. But I don't think we've really had seriously talked about it before. And I think it's an important one to talk about every now and again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think it's good for people to listen, or people that are listening or watching, whatever. We all go through it. Everybody has it, right? There's no denying that it's there. It exists. You have to do something about it. So maybe there's this, facade that you can get through life without having to worry about it, but it's a facade.
It's a facade. It's a lie we tell ourselves. Somebody asked me in the presentation I gave on this earlier about, okay, so when would you rewrite? And my answer is almost never. Because you're going to replace a code base with one that's less understood. And realistically, every rewrite I've ever been a part of in the 15 years I've been here in this industry has ended up with the same amount of problems, the same amount of technical debt, maybe just looking a little different as the previous version did. Now, there have been a couple where we knew that was going to be the case and we accepted it, but we needed to change because we literally just needed a language change. This was going from a prototype in PHP to a fully productionized version in C++. Huge change, huge technical drivers for that change. But we knew we were not getting out of technical debt by doing that. We just knew we were getting new technical debt. And that was very well executed and realistically done. But a lot of the times you're not going to rewrite. You're really just not. You're not going to get there. Or if you do get there, you're going to end up exactly as rushed as you always are. So you really need to make sure that the gains you're getting are worth it. It has to cancel out the right amount of technical debt on the other side. Otherwise, if you can refactor, you should refactor. And refactoring could be fully replacing a single component. That could be it. But looking at the whole system and say we're going to rewrite this whole system, you're not going to be really happy. This is a really good way of putting it. I wish I had thought about this when I had used the credit card analogy. Technical debt is borrowing time at the interest rate of betting on your future, right? Be nice to future you. Be nice to future not you. Okay? Because realistically, I have personally, right, in my career, I've only ever worked on one greenfield product. Everything else is a thing that has been existed for a few years and established and exists already. And so the technical debt that we carry as the team working on it in the now is not the technical debt we chose. We did not choose this technical debt. We didn't sign up for it. Some of us did, and that's fine. But realistically, you have to remember that you are passing that on to the future engineers. And so what is acceptable for you and what would not cause you to burn out may not be the same for them, for the new team down the line, et cetera, unless it's your own company and your own personal product. And even then you could decide to sell your own company, right?
Yeah.
The technical debt carries. It is that balance remains from I'm going to say generation to generation. It is not wiped out just because you've left the company. So be nice to future you with your technical debt. Be nice to future generations of engineers working on the product with your technical debt. We do have it. You're not going to ever hit this utopia situation where you've created the perfect system without any technical debt. All it takes is one CVE. and there will be one. I guarantee you. How many have we seen in the last few years? We see them more, I feel like, these days than we did in years past. So that is also very, very wise words from Our Hope 9, who I would love to have you actually on the stream one of these days, because I know you're a wealth of knowledge on all kinds of cool topics. But yeah, that's great. I'm just gonna leave that up there and let people digest it. We're at time. I feel like we're at time, and I didn't even get into all the things I want to talk to. I wanted to talk more about technical debt and CVEs. We're gonna have to just come back to that, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good topic.
It's a good topic. Anyway, so we will not be streaming in 2 weeks because it's my birthday, and I will be sword fighting instead. That might be live streamed though, so I don't know. If it is, I'll post it on LinkedIn if people feel like watching me hit people with swords. It's good times. It's fun. It's a very friendly sport. Other than that, we will be back in August with, I don't know, maybe CVEs. That might be the topic. We'll see what we want to do about that. And then Johnny's out second half of August, and I think we resume our regular every 2 weeks cadence in September.
September, yep.
Is this a good time to talk about a 2-hour stream format? Like, I could.
Oh my God, this is our This dude on every single live stream is trying to get us to go 2 hours.
You know, I honestly, here's the thing. Where the topic warrants it, yes. Conversely, though, where the topic doesn't warrant it, we cut it off before an hour. I don't think we should feel like we have to try to fill an hour. I do think it's worth fill. If we have 2-hour topics, I don't know. I feel like I'd rather do one big 2-hour stream than do two 1-hour streams 2 weeks apart.
Yeah. And I think like if you're doing a deep dive, a 2-hour stream makes sense. You know, and Our Hope 9 is probably one of the very few people that want a longer stream. Like I can probably count on one hand how many people have like requested, more time. Most of the time it's like, can you please like shorten it? And then like, add like YouTube shorts or whatever, so I can just go right to the thing that I'm looking for. So.
Oh, you can't make everybody happy, but Our Hope 9's been with us the longest, so he's the only one I really care about.
I know. Honestly, like this is our guy across both streams. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the birthday wishes. Yeah, you know what? I'll keep that in mind because there's a topic I really want to do. I would love thoughts on this, so people should send me LinkedIn messages about it. I want to do a topic on strategies for databases, right? When you do a rollout and you have a database schema and you need to roll back. That's something I've been talking to some friends and colleagues about. I need to actually like build a lab. I don't have a home lab, if you can believe it. I need to actually set up a lab environment and do some testing. I think I've got some ideas. I'm curious if other people have some as well. That would be maybe a 2-hour stream, I think, because of the size of the thing and not wanting to rush it. So if I get my stuff together after vacation time and into the fall and I have that stream set up, maybe around October, we could do that one and we could try a 2-hour format if it's a worthwhile deep dive. I would be game to try it. I don't think I could do it really regularly, but when it's worthwhile, for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
But no one's going to tell me no, so let's just try it. What's the worst that can happen?
I do what I want.
Wow, hang on. Sorry, this is exciting. Yay! If you haven't seen the OpenShift subreddit, then you should check it out. It's a great place to get help. I myself occasionally answer questions. There are lots of Red Hatters answer questions there. It's a good place to go get advice. Obviously, our actual support engineers are all super excellent and very knowledgeable. And I can't say enough nice things about how great they are and how helpful they are. But the subreddit is also just really nice. Apparently I'm getting...
He sent an email. I mean, I felt it would be rude to go to my email and start doing stuff while we were streaming, so I'm waiting.
Well, now I'm watching the comments and I know an email is incoming, so whatever. Anyway, whatever. We're going to end this stream. We're just being even sillier than we already were today. Thanks for coming. Thanks for talking to me about swords, guys. I'll talk to you all early next month, early August, with whatever stream idea I come up with for that. Probably CVEs, I think. Otherwise, until then, choose your technical debt wisely. I hope it makes a lot of sense why I say that. And I'll see you all in about a month. Cheers.
Yeah.